Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. I'm Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law, and today's guest is Professor Jo Potuto. She is the Richard H. Larson Professor of Constitutional Law Emeritus from the College of Law at the University of Nebraska. She's also former president of the National Association of Faculty Athletic Representatives, Division I, a published scholar and experienced public commentator, and now the host of a YouTube show where she's been analyzing cases. So welcome, Professor Jo, as I understand you're known.
Yeah, well, you can call me Jo. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for being here. And why don't we start with your new YouTube show?
Yeah, we launched the end of November, and I have watched some YouTube, and I really started watching during COVID, and I got intrigued because on YouTube, you can find virtually anything you're interested in. You can find lectures on and documentaries on and people just chatting about it. And it was so extraordinary to me. It was like a treasure trove. And I started watching a little true crime, and I watched some commentators on true crime, and I started thinking to myself, I can do that. So I started to guest on some YouTube channels they were covering trials and legal cases. And it was so enjoyable to me. And I discovered that I did do it pretty well. And I had people saying, you should do one, get a channel. So I did. That's the genesis.
That's amazing. It's kind of what started me in podcasting many years ago before Aspen. I didn't see anybody talking about legal education. I was like, well, we can start it. I can start a podcast and see what happens. And so here we both are with our channel. So what channel is it on YouTube if I were going to watch?
It's called Prof Jo Explains.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you need to know. What I find by doing it is the comments that I get most often are, you explain things really well. And that's very gratifying to somebody who's taught, who teaches, to hear people say, the thing that you spend your life doing, you actually do pretty well.
That's some good affirmation.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit about the kinds of videos I might watch, the kind of explanations you might give on Professor Jo Explains.
What I'm doing is generally a couple of lives that become videos twice a week, and it's mostly commenting on current trials. I'm doing some other things, and I plan to branch out a little more. I did one on birthright citizenship, for example. But primarily right now, my lane is the trials. And I've also been doing live commentary on trials, which is extremely time consuming, and on hearings. Right now, I'm doing a trial in New Jersey that they're doing closing arguments on today. And I did the hearing on Alec Murdaugh, the South Carolina, the scion of a very, very wealthy family who ended up being convicted of murdering his wife and son, and, big story. So that's what I've been doing. And what I've done with the videos to some extent, and I want to do more, is to branch off what's happening to explain the underlying law. There are a lot of lawyers who do it, and they do it really extremely well. But what they don't do, in my opinion, and what I try to do, is explain what we would do in law school. Explain the why before you get to the rule, so that somebody understands. You don't tell them, hey, you can't have hearsay. And hearsay is an out-of-court statement, but you explain why that rule exists. Or with the Fourth Amendment, I've been doing things on the privilege against self-incrimination and why. We have a big case involving immunity. And I've heard lots of lawyers explain, well, qualified immunity means they can't use anything you say or anything derived from what you say. And you hear the people constantly asking that question over and over again. So what I did was start with the privilege against self-incrimination. You don't ever have to say anything that's going to incriminate you. And if I give you immunity, I have to make you exactly like it would be if you never had to say anything. So as you're evaluating it over here, go back over here. If I never said anything, you would never have anything to use. If I never said anything, you couldn't follow an investigative trail from what I said. Back up to this. Well, I think that works when you're trying to teach, but I think that's been working really well in explaining what goes on at a trial, what goes on at a hearing, hearing, how an appellate hearing works. So having done some trials, I'm certainly not an experienced trial lawyer, having done appeals, and I have a book on appellate advocacy, it gives me the opportunity, I think, to give a broader picture of what the trial lawyer, who can do it exceedingly well, talks about, and even what the appellate lawyer talks about. And it's been fun for me. It's been instructive for me. When I took evidence law in law school, it was so counterintuitive to me that this is the honest to God truth. I told myself when I took the multi-state, if I get an evidence question, I'm going to pick the answer I think can't be right. And that's the one I'm going to pick. Because this stuff, my intuition is not getting me to the right answer. But when you watch the trials, you see it over and over again, it comes alive. It makes a lot of sense. And I thought when I was in law school that we should do more of the watch it. I can tell it to you, but if I can show it to you, and even better, what I did when I did moot court was if I can have you do it and then you watch you and you say, gee, this is what's not working. It becomes so much more vibrant and so much more connective educational experience, and one they're much more likely to to understand and then be able to use. So that's kind of a long answer to that short question, but there it is. Excuse me.
They can think back, oh, that was what the witness said in that trial, that kind of thing. It would underscore what you're trying to teach them. So do you find that most of your listeners or viewers are people already in the law, or is this a YouTube show that's become just very popular among the true crime aficionados?
It's mostly the latter, and I'm still a baby. We started November 30th, so I'm still a baby channel, but I've grown. They tell me much faster than programs start that my first jump was a big jump. It's mostly people who are interested in true crime. Many of them are interested not simply in the sort of the sexy stuff or the news stuff, but they really want to understand what's happening. And that's most of the people that are in my chat, at least, do. And then I do have some lawyers. I actually have had people who say they had thought about going into law, and my explanations have made me think about it. Last week, I had somebody send me an email saying that he had always thought about law school and never did it, and now he's in his mid-50s. And when I said you can always go and it's a great education, he has decided to apply. And I thought, well, I just feel really good about that.
That's so wonderful. My dad many years ago, probably a couple decades ago now, went back to law school at the age of 50 and practiced for 20 years. It was great. I tell all my non-traditional age students that.
Absolutely.
Well, good for
Absolutely.
you for inspiring someone. Maybe they'll consider St. Mary's.
Well, if I get the question, I will certainly tell them. But yeah, I tell you, you learn your whole life, and there's no reason not to do it at whatever age if you want to. And what I tell them is 3 years from now, you can either have a law degree and practice, or you can be 3 years on and not have it in practice. Years are going to come. The question is, what do you want to do with it? And if this is what you're thinking about, go ahead and do it.
That's exactly right. Said from a woman who just started her own YouTube channel in November. I'm sure that was never on your bucket list.
Never was, no. Oh, and I still don't know any of the vocabulary. I'm a total loss as to what you call things. I don't know what verb I should use for things. It's just my uphill climb has only just begun. Today, in fact, I was doing the appeal in the Murdaugh case and this trial, a trial in New Jersey. And I went from one stream to another, and I watched the first issue in the Murdaugh appeal, and it took an hour and 20 minutes. And it's the issue, if it's reversed, it will be this issue. There was some jury tampering by the court clerk with the jury. And I thought, well, I don't know that I want to watch the second issue because I can't comment. They're going so fast, and I would never interject a comment. And then you don't hear the lawyer, you don't hear the judge. I might as well go back to the trial. And I did. And then I got something saying, you cut off the stream. They're all people who want to watch the appeal. This is where I am in doing the channel. No idea I was going to do that.
That's funny. Well, I saw in looking at some of your episodes, you shared with your viewers the Donna Adelson trial.
Yes. And Charlie before her.
Yeah. Okay. That one has been widely watched by the media and by the legal education community. How is it you find media coverage of these cases that you are analyzing?
Well, the media coverage generally, in most of these cases, is relatively local. The Adelson case, the Tepe case right now, the what's happening with Savannah Guthrie, there are cases that hit nationally and or at least regionally. But a lot of cases are more local, and I think the media generally does a pretty good job. But you know from watching, I'm sure, news stories about legal issues, they try hard and they sometimes get close and sometimes they get it right. But most often they're just off a little and not deliberately and maybe not in ways that matter to someone who doesn't know law, but they're not quite there. And the media coverage of trials is about the same. Now, the YouTube stuff, on the other hand, the channel stuff is all over the place. You know, you get people who are partisans on either side, who often don't understand what they're talking about, who are not measured, who see something and then are off on their own little gallop on a horse that the judge is biased, the defense lawyer doesn't know what she's doing, and that sort of thing. On YouTube, you see quite a bit of that. So, and to some extent, I think YouTube does a good job. And in this area, I think we could all be better.
One thing I've been thinking about lately as I've been reading the news and social media, all about the grand jury convenings that are happening with these national and global issues that are coming up, whether it's claims of voter fraud or Jeffrey Epstein, all these different things, fraud in government grants and resources. And I think that it's unfortunate that the public knows so little about the grand jury process and why government agencies can't disclose what's happening in the grand jury and that kind of thing. Is that an area that you have covered at all in your show?
I've done it peripherally right now. I haven't done anything straight on, but that is the kind of more general, more focused commentary that I would like to do, because I do believe, and I'm sure you do, that the more you understand how a system operates and why it operates, the more you can appreciate, even if you disagree, with what the results or what the limitations are on what happens. We also, I mean, actually during World War II and after World War II, when we had this sort of, the communist threat, and we were picking up spies from Los Alamos and other places, when some of the documents from the Soviet Union became public after the Soviet Union broke up and they got into some of their documents, they found one that I just loved, which advised their spies in England and the United States. And they said, in England, if you get caught, just admit it. But in the United States, everything becomes a long lawsuit. So if it's in the United States, just fight, fight, fight. And I do think, I mean, in one sense, that's a compliment to our system, but in another sense, I think it's an indictment to our system that we do litigate, we provide due process, we try to do things in a fair way, but we sometimes don't know where closure should be. And we can have things go too long and too long, which I also think feeds into a public sentiment that, the system isn't working right. It isn't working well. And I think even that could be explained better.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, justice delayed is justice denied. That's what, a lot of people say,
Right.
not realizing that, well, when you are accused of a crime, you would want to have all those protections and all those levels
Exactly.
and that long
Exactly.
road to trials
Exactly.
and appeals.
And what I see in the chat a lot, is a complaint about defense lawyers representing murderers or offenses against children. And why would anybody do it and how they can do it? And this is despicable. And he's making an argument here, and I keep repeating and repeating and repeating. This is the system. We should embrace it because this is what we stand for. We're not accusatory system where you're accused and that's it, off with your heads or, prison. So absolutely agree with you.
I know that that's a hard thing, especially for the public to understand. I mean, it can be a hard thing for law students to understand, but we take our oath that says that people are entitled to representation when they are charged with a crime. And so it's good that we have that system. So how do you decide what to cover as a new YouTube channel?
Well, basically, right now, it's more what's available that I can handle. I'm not in a position where I can independently stream. I mean, I don't have the setup to do it. So I have to find a trial that either the court itself is publicly streaming or an entity like Court TV has decided to cover and stream, because otherwise I can't do it. I can report about it, and I do that with some cases that are not streamed or televised. But if I want to be in there doing the on-the-spot commentary, I've got to be hooked hooked up to somebody who's actually streaming it. So that is probably the number one thing that directs me towards what I can cover. And then I'm looking for cases that have unusual, if not unusual interests, at least legal issues in them that one can talk about, and not simply let's watch a defendant be prosecuted and at the end of the day we'll expect he'll be convicted. And so that's what I look for. Of course, I'm pushed by what the national stories are because I also want to grow the viewership. And if I pick a topic that nobody's ever heard of, it's pretty hard, particularly as a small channel, to be able to generate interest in it when there's no interest out there. But so that's probably, it's practicalities more than anything right now that push me.
And is there one episode or one topic that has been wildly more successful than the other ones you've covered?
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned Donna Adelson, the Adelson trials. He was a law professor at Florida State who was murdered now, 14 years ago? And they've now had 4 trials. Anything involving the Adelsons picks up a lot of interest. And in among the Adelsons, Wendy Adelson, the former wife of the law professor who has never been prosecuted, will get viewers in a heartbeat, because the question is, why hasn't she been prosecuted? Or 2 questions. Why hasn't she been prosecuted? When will she be prosecuted? And the appetite to get answers to those 2 questions when the answers don't change is insatiable.
Well, I'd love for you to let our listeners know, why hasn't she been prosecuted, and why won't she be prosecuted?
Well, the why she hasn't been yet is really that they've used her as a witness for the state in each of the prosecutions. And I think, and I've talked to the chat about it, and I think that they probably could have successfully prosecuted without her, but she provided a framework for what occurred. She's always said she doesn't know anything about it, but she still provided a framework, and her mother's been convicted and her brother's been convicted. So I think that's really the why of it. I've had questions such as, well, now that her mother and brother have both been convicted, now won't they prosecute her? Or questions about maybe when the appeals are over. So I've done things about, how long an appeal takes, and then they can go on to collateral attacks. So if you're going to wait until all that is over, what you're saying is she won't be prosecuted ever. You've got to understand this. So that's the why of it. The other part of it is hers will be the most difficult case to do, because assuming that she was involved, and I think most everybody thinks she knew about it and probably had some involvement, the evidence against her is the hardest to do. She didn't send emails to people. She didn't directly involve herself in any conversations. And so the case will be more circumstantial and more inferences from the evidence that's out there. So it's a much harder case. And if the prosecutors decide not to prosecute her, it will probably be that they think the case is very difficult to do. Now, I've also said, because I'm willing to give my opinion on these, that my view is when it's a major crime and the prosecutor believes that the individual committed the crime or had complicity in the commission of the crime and has a reasonable base in the evidence to believe that there could be a conviction, although it will be a hard case, I think there's an obligation to take that case and not just let it go. But anyway, that's where we are with Wendy.
I know it was just such a horrific situation and very unusual thankfully, for a law professor to be killed. And as I understand it, from back then, it was over the custody of the children, I think.
Yeah. Yes.
And who are the children with now?
With Wendy. They've moved. They were in Miami with her, and they moved to Austin, Texas a couple of years ago. And I can tell you this because the people who are interested in this know where she is. I mean, she apparently at one point decided to move to Colorado, and everybody knew that. I mean, so I don't know what her life is like with all of this. But yeah, it was a really terrible case. And some of the facts in it are just really heart-wrenching. And they're part of the reason why Wendy is so much the center of attention. She moved to Miami right after the murders, changed the children's name to her last name, which wiped out Dan Markel's family.
Mm-hmm.
Has made it extraordinarily difficult for his parents to have interaction with the children. So they not only lost their son, they effectively lost their grandchild. And so those sorts of facts just really bring attention to her. And people who follow true crime are just very, very, very exercised at the idea that she could be that sort of person. And there's reason to believe she was involved, and yet she's not being prosecuted. So I do think it's the greater context that has really people so, what would I say, obsessed almost with her.
Well, I can see why people enjoy listening to you because those were very good explanations and really interesting. And so I am curious, is there another law professor that you know about, somebody who's taught for decades at a law school, who has a YouTube channel where they explain cases?
I know lawyers that have done it. I don't know if there's anyone who was full-time law professor. I mean, there's some lawyers who've been adjuncts, as you know, who have channels. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that there are, but I don't know of anyone.
Well, you're the first one that I have met. So it's very interesting. I wish you a lot of luck with the channel, and
Thank you.
people will check it out. It's on YouTube. It's Professor Jo Explains.
Prof Jo Explains.
Oh, excuse me, Prof Jo Explains, where you're analyzing cases and hosting that show. And it sounds like engaging with the audience.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's like teaching, really. You engage with your students, and I found one of the best parts of teaching, maybe the best part, was to have students interested and engaged and willing to ask questions and to bat back and answer and not accept it because you're the person at the lectern. And so it's pretty similar to that. So it's just great.
Well, it has to be fun too because they self-select into watching, right, and engaging.
That's true.
Whereas if somebody's sitting in civil procedure, they might not be quite so interested.
No doubt.
Well, thank you very much, and good luck with the
Thank
channel.
you.
Before we conclude, I want to ask you what I ask all my guests, and that is, what are your predictions for the future of legal education in the coming decade?
Yeah, I guess I have two. One of them is I think we are going to have to come to grips with AI. I think it can be a great tool and a great adjunct to teaching, but I don't think it should substitute for the educational experience, for the professor-student experience. And I think there's a real risk that students will go down that rabbit hole and find it's an easy way to do research, or it's an easy way to get writing done. So I think that's the challenge for the next 10 years. More globally, I think we've spent quite a number of years now trying to make law schools and legal education more culturally diverse, more aware of the greater world, more inclusive of different points of view, different ethnicities, different cultures, all of that. And it's all to the good, all to the good. But I think what we're going to start doing now is try to decide what defines us as a nation, because the diversity is wonderful and we should embrace it. But there have to be some core values or some core commonalities that make us a nation. And I think we're going to start in legal education to try to look at that, whether it's citizenship, whether it's how we do elections, how we define values of our society. I think that's what we're going to have to come back and look at now.
Well, thank you, Jo Potuto, and good luck with your show, Prof Jo Explains, on YouTube. I hope that our listeners will check it out. And if you've enjoyed this conversation and want to listen to additional thought leaders in legal education, you can find other Aspen Leading Edge podcast episodes on your favorite podcast channels or on the Aspen Leading Edge podcast website. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a wonderful time, and it's a great podcast. So.
Thank you.